Okay, so today we'll be making a window with SDL2 in the C language. We're not really going to need much today, but I am going to start by cloning a repository from GitHub that we will be using in later videos. So we'll need to go to github.com, and my username Jeremiah Cheatham, and we're going to go to a different repository, SDL2 examples. And we don't really need anything from here, but we just want access to some images, some sound files, font. So we don't really need to worry about the code that's in here, but these are all the code examples for the videos. We're going to be deleting them, but we do need the font, the image, the music, and the sound. So you can grab this URL here from the top level. And take it into a terminal. We're going to need a couple things. We're going to need Git to clone this. We're going to need GCC for compiling C code, and we're going to need SDL installed with whatever kind of development headers for your system that you need. So you're going to need SDL, GCC, and Git right now. It looks like that's about it. So let's clone this, and we'll go into the directory. So like I said, we don't need the code examples. You can look at them, use them, but since we're just going to be building it, we can just delete all these code examples. And you can use whatever text editor you like. We don't need anything special here. We're just writing plain C code. So whatever text editor you feel comfortable with, you can use a plain text editor. You can use something like VS Code is very popular, as long as it's some syntax highlighting, maybe LSP to help if you have any syntax errors or any other coding errors. But I'm just going to be using Vim. It doesn't really matter what you use. You can use whatever you want. And so if you're using VS Code, you're going to want to go inside this folder, this C SDL folder. You're going to want to launch Vim or launch VS Code from there, or you can just launch VS Code and tell it to open up this folder. And then you're going to need to create a file that we can work with, and we're just going to call it this 01 open window. That'll work. So I'm just going to use touch. Okay. So we are going to need a couple of the C standard library things. We're going to need stdio for input output, the displaying text on the screen with like printf, things like that. And we are going to be using bools, true and false bools that are not in the standard C. They're added to the standards. The C, they've been added to C. So we're going to need to use std bool, and we will be using SDL2. So let's just make a simple project just to see if it compiles first. So I'm going to include first the stdio. And the std bool, even though we're not using it just yet. And let's just make a simple hello world real quick, just to see if everything's working right. We'll do a little printf. And next. Okay, that should be all that we need. We'll save that file. Make sure you save it, because if you're editing your file and you forget to save it and you go to compile, either you're going to be compiling old code or nothing at all for this file since we haven't saved it yet. I'm not going to quit it. Yeah. So to compile this, we're just going to use GCC directly. And we don't need to link in SDL just yet because we haven't used it. So we're just going to use the source file that we are working with right now, which is the 01openwindow.c, and the output file that we want to create, I'm just going to call it the exact same thing without the C. That's going to give us our compiled binary file. And to run it, we are just going to do that. I'm not sure in Windows. I haven't really used Windows, so it should be something like this, but I don't know exactly. You might end up with an exe file or something like that. And we get hello world, which is what we printed out up here. Okay, so we know everything's working. If you've gotten this far, you know that you can compile with GCC. We could take it a step further and add SDL2 in here. Now I'm on Linux, so SDL2 is actually SDL version 2 is actually in a subfolder called SDL2 in the standard include path. So C can look for header files in the standard include path, but it's actually going to be in a subfolder called SDL2. So it doesn't confuse it with SDL version 1 or the new SDL version 3 coming out. So on your system, I'm not sure where your header files for SDL2 have been put, so you'll need to point this include at wherever those are located. So the header file we're looking for is SDL.h, but it's, for me, it's in this subfolder called SDL2. And we don't really need to do anything else. I'm going to save it again. And this time we will add in the linker for, so that we've used these, we're using this SDL.h as an include, but the compiler actually needs to know how to link that dynamic, it's either a shared object in Windows or a dynamic link library, or sorry, shared object in Linux or a dynamic link library in Windows. It's going to need to know where that is. Again, it's the library is already in my standard path for Linux, so if you have it in some other place or in a local folder, you're going to need to point it exactly where it's at. So we can just do this, and this -L is actually going to look for something called lib. So it's going to be lib SDL. So it's going to, the linker's going to look for lib SDL2. And nothing happens, so that's actually a good thing. And we'll run it again, and it still works. So we were able to include the SDL header file, and we were able to link it, even though we didn't actually use it for anything. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to initialize SDL, and then we're going to need to create a window object and a render object. So since we're going to be creating these two objects that are going to be on the heap, we need to manage those resources. So I'm going to put all kind of everything that I'm managing, all the resources that I'm managing for a game. Since this is a very small project, I'm going to be putting them in the same spot. I'm going to make a struct called game, and I'm just going to put all my resources that I'm managing inside the struct. So it'll make it very easy to handle all these resources. So the two resources I'm going to be dealing with for just making a window is going to be the window and the renderer. So I'm just going to make a game struct, and then I'm going to put these two resources in there. So then when I start initializing SDL, I'll know where these resources are at. I'm going to give it a capital G on the game, kind of like if it was like a class in another language. This is so I know that this is the struct. This is the actual struct object. And let's just look real quick at what's happening here. We'll take a look at this in a second. These are going to be pointers. The first one's going to be a pointer to a window. We'll just call it window. And a render. Okay, so that's going to be our struct. Now, I'm going to initialize SDL, but I don't want to initialize it in the main function. So I'm going to make a function that is just going to handle initializing SDL and all these things, and then I'm going to call it from inside the main function. So I'm just going to call this function SDL initialize. And I'm going to make another decision about this. The way I'm going to handle errors in this program is that any function that I call that could error, I'm going to have it return the true for an error and false for the function was successful. This kind of follows C. Anytime you have anything in C that can kind of fail, if it returns 0 or nothing, then it succeeded, and if it turns something, then something went wrong. If it returns some kind of error code or number. So what I'm going to do with every function that I make is I'm going to have it return nothing if it was successful, and true if it errors. So I'm not actually having my functions return things. I'm just having them return whether it errored or not. I'll be passing stuff into functions through the arguments. So we'll call this, now this is going to return, that's why we brought in the bool. We're going to be returning bools, whether it's error or not. So we're going to call this one bool SDL initialize. Hopefully I'm spelling this right. Yep. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass in a pointer to the struct that we made. We don't want to pass in the struct itself. We just want to pass in the pointer to it. So we're going to just do struct. I'm not using type defs to hide that my structs are structs either. I just kind of want to know that they are structs. So I'm always just going to call them structs. And I'm just going to call the pointer that I'm passing in game. This is just going to be a forward declaration right here. I'm actually going to put this function. Yep, there's my LSP telling me I just messed up. So I'm going to put this expected after struct. I have no idea what he's talking about. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to initialize SDL before we even make a window or make a render or do anything else. So let's go look at that real quick. So if you're using SDL, the website is great. This winky.libsdl.org. If you just Google anything that you want for SDL, you're going to right away find it up. So right here, we're going to use this initialize to initialize SDL, and it only really takes one parameter. You can initialize just the video system or the audio system. We're just going to initialize everything because we're going to be using the same code later on, so we can just tell it to initialize everything, even though we're not actually using all the stuff. We're not using the audio system. We're not using all these other things. It's not really going to hurt anything right now because we do intend to be using these in the future. So there should be an everything. Here it is. SDL init everything. So this is just a, I think this is just a, what do you call this? A pound defined for literally a number that it's telling the subsystem these things are available, and it's using a binary number to let it know which things should be turned on or turned off. So we're not really going to worry about that. That's already defined for us. We're just going to use it. So we're just going to use this, and you'll see that it's returning an int and it returns 0 on success or a negative number if it fails. So again, we're going to be using that to know if our code is failing or not. So the function we want is SDL, and all the SDL functions start with this capital. This is kind of the way C does namespaces. This is going to be, everything that's SDL is going to be capital SDL in the beginning, and the function calls, they're kind of camel cased. So this is the init function, and this is, it's taken in a unsigned 32-bit, which is just this. For us, it's going to be the SDL init everything. And we want to know if this fails or not. So we're going to wrap this in an if statement. So let's go SDL. And we're just going to use that everything. Yeah. Now again, this is going to return 0 on success or a negative number if it fails. So we just need to check if it was 0. And what we're going to do here is we're going to give a nice error message for ourselves to know if this has failed. And then we are going to propagate this failure down. So if this fails, we're going to make this whole function return and let it know that it also failed too. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use a formatted printf so we can send it to the standard error. And then we are going to return true so that this function just completely ends. We don't need this SDL initialize function to carry on if this first thing has failed. We're failed and we need to clean up and get out of here now. So let's use, we're going to use the formatted printf because I want to send this to standard error. So the standard error file handler, whatever. And it's just like printf, except the very first parameter is where you want to send it to. You can send it to a file, or you can send it to standard out, or you can send it to standard error. And then just the standard, the way that printf works here. And I'm just going to say what happened. We errored when we were initializing SDL, and then I'm actually going to take the SDL error itself and stick it in this print statement as well. Tober speller. Okay, so error initializing SDL. Now I actually want to stick in the actual error that happened, what actually occurred. So I'm going to be adding a string inside this string, basically. So I'm going to use the string format specifier. And we will put a new line. Now, to get the error that actually occurred for SDL, we're going to use SDL get error. And it's just a function call that returns a string of whatever the error that occurred happened. So, and you'll see that SDL, capital SDL with the underscore, the same kind of SDL namespace thing. You're going to see this with all SDL function names and the camel case. And it's just a function call. So that will deal with our getting whatever error occurred. So we are printing the error message, that's for us, that an initialization error, error occurred while initialization. And then we're actually getting whatever SDL said was the error, and we're putting it in one long string. And now we want to unroll this whole thing. We want to shut the program down, basically. So we want to know that this whole thing is returning now. It's not going to continue. So we're going to return true. And that should be it for that. Now we haven't called this function anywhere. So we're going to be calling this in the main function. But to do this, we actually need to have an instance of the struct to be able to send the reference into the function call that we're calling. And we also need to be able to handle all our cleanup and stuff like that. So let's look at how we need to clean this up. I'm going to make another function. It's not going to return anything. So this function here is trying to initialize SDL, but what happens if it fails? And for right now, nothing needs to happen this far, because if initialization has failed, nothing needs to happen. But when we add in the window and the renderer, then we're going to need to deal with that. Let's make this, let's initialize this struct up here. So we need to make this game object that we've said we have the struct here. We need to pass this thing into the function. So let's just make an instance of that. We'll just call it game. And we will get our two members as window. And this is a pointer, so we definitely do not want this pointer to be initialized, or we want it to be initialized to null, because we haven't done anything yet. So we don't want to just not initialize it and then have garbage data there and then dereferencing a pointer to some random number. So everything that I'm going to do in C code, everything's going to be initialized. There's never going to be me declaring a variable that's not initialized. Okay, so we can call this function down here. We can wrap this in an if statement, but we don't really have the what the if is going to do yet. So the way we would call this is we would just say SDL initialize, and we need to pass in, we need a pointer to a game object. So we're going to pass in a reference to this struct right here that we've created. Okay, and we can just leave hello world for now. Okay, standard pool. Is definitely supposed to be there. Oh, I have an idea. Yep. Oh my lord. I forgot to put a semicolon there. Okay. So, silly me, forgot to semicolon the declaration of the struct. Very silly. Do not like the way it formatted in that. Okay. Or did I? Are you kidding me? Did I do it twice? I did it twice. I did it twice. I haven't been writing C in a while. Okay. Very silly. Okay. All right. We still got hello world. Let's see down here. Okay, as you can see, I made some major mistake here by not putting the semicolon at the declaration of the struct and also on the instance of the struct. So hopefully you won't make the same mistake that I made. That was a bit silly, couldn't find it for a while. Okay, so now we're initializing SDL. Let's start talking about the SDL window. So we're going to use the SDL create window. It's going to take a string, this const char pointer to a string. We need an X, a Y, a width and a height, and we need some flags. So for X and Y, we're not going to actually specify an X and a Y. I just kind of want the window to show up centered on the screen. So we're going to use this predefined SDL window position centered. We're going to use that for both X and Y. And then for the width and the height, we're actually going to make our own width and height. And we're going to put that up as a kind of a global constant. And also the window title. So we're going to make the setting for the window title, we're going to just do that as a defined constant. We're going to do the X and the Y position as SDL window position centered. We're going to do the width and the height as what we're going to define as the screen width and the screen height for our window. And we're not going to be using any flags for this. So let's do the title, the window title first. I'm going to go up here, and I'm not going to put them right with the includes. I'm going to put them a little bit further down. These are going to be globals. They're you're just using the define macro. I'm going to call it window title. And we can just, you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it 01 open window. And for our width and our height, I'm going to call it screen width and screen height. And I'm using all capitals because these are globals and I want to know that they're globals. We're going to go 800. It doesn't really matter. We're not doing anything with the screen today. We're just making a screen. So it's going to be 800 by 600. It could be whatever number that you would like to create. Okay, so we have those. Make sure on these defines that you do not put a semicolon at the end of them. These are not part of the C code. They're part of the preprocessor. They're macros for the preprocessor directives. So if you put a semicolon here, your code is not going to work correctly. Now that we have these, we can go down here, and in our initialization function, we are going to start working on making our window and our renderer. So the function that we need is SDL create window. And we need the up here, which is our window title as our first parameter. And let's take a look. Then we need our X, our Y, width, and a height. So we're going to be using that SDL window pause center. This one, window pause centered. Oops, not undefined. Sorry. This one. And we'll do it twice. We're going to use it for the X and the Y. And then we are going to use the ones that we created for the width and the height. So that was screen width and screen height. And I don't think that we're passing anything in except the 0 for the rest of the flags. Yeah, we're just going to put a 0 there. Now this is another function that is going to fail or not fail. So we want to be able to deal with that. And this time we're not going to wrap the function in an if statement. What we're going to do is we're going to run this function, and this function is going to return to us a pointer. So it actually needs the the window pointer that is in the game struct. So we've passed in the game struct right here. So we're going to go game, we're going to dereference game, and we're going to get that window. So now what we need to know is did this fail? And instead of wrapping this in an if statement, we're going to check this and see if this is still null. If this function fails, it should be over here in the documentation, returns the window that was created or null. So we already had it null to begin with, but if the function fails, it's actually going to return null again. So we're either going to have something or we're going to have null. And that's what we're going to be checking on. So right here, we're going to put our if statement, and we're just going to see if this is still null. And we don't need to say, does it equal null? We could just say, is it not nothing? So is it, so this is just, you know, if this is something, and then the this is just switching it, is it not nothing? So basically, if it's nothing, this is going to happen. And we want another print statement. We're going to send to error, and this time we're just going to say error creating window. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get that message up here. So I'm just going to take both of these. I'm just going to yank those and put them in here. Oops. And we're going to change this. Now, we are using the same exact setup, but we don't want to say error initializing SDL. We want to say error creating window. And then we will also get the SDL error message from that. And again, we want to bail out of this function. So this inside this if statement, if it hits this return, this function is no longer carrying on, and we're returning a true to let us know that it did fail. Okay, and while we're here, why don't we also create the SDL renderer? So that is the other thing that we need right here. And this is the SDL renderer, and this is going to take in a pointer to the window, and it's also going to take in a, let's see, an index, which we're going to have it be -1, and flags, and I don't think we're using, no, we're not using any flags, and it's going to return a pointer to a renderer, like the other one returned a pointer to window, and that is also in our game struct. So here's our function call right here. We could just grab this right here. And we can just put it here. Okay, so now this is returning something. Okay, and it's going to be the pointer in our game struct. Okay, equals, and now we need this pointer to the window, which is right here. The game window right here is the pointer that we need. So we can just back this up, and there is our game window pointer. And we are using -1 on the index, and we're not passing any flags. And just like the one above, this is going to either succeed or fail. And if it fails, we're dealing with the pointer, so it's going to return a null pointer, or it's going to return an address that is good. So we are checking again. Remember up here when we set them both to null initially, and so they are already null before this function even happens. But if this errors or this one errors, now they're going to still be returned as null. But if they succeed, we're going to have a good address that we can use. So I'm just going to copy this guy again, yank it. So this one, we need to make sure that we change this game window to game renderer. And our print statement here needs to be error creating renderer. And we're still returning true. Now, if this function, if basically this function is calling 3 functions inside of it. So if this one succeeds, this if statement doesn't even get triggered, so nothing happens. If this one succeeds, this if statement doesn't trigger. If this one succeeds, the if statement doesn't trigger. So we actually need to return from this function now, totally successfully, returning as false, because false is our success case. That means everything went good. We do need to deal with what happens now when these don't succeed. We need to start cleaning up this, if the first function fails, nothing needs to be done really at all. But if it succeeds, if SDL does get initialized, and then we get to the window and the window fails, we don't need to do anything with window or render. Those are both null. Nothing ever happened with them. But we do need to shut down SDL. And if we get as far as the window was created, but then the render fails, now we have this populated window that has been, memory has been allocated to it, and SDL has been initialized. So we're going to need to free the window, and then we need to shut down SDL. So do you see, as this gets built up, we're going to need to start dealing with cleaning up resources and shutting down correctly. So that's what we're going to do next before we even try to run this. We're going to make another function. We'll just throw it right up here. And this one's going to return void, because this is just basically our shutdown function. This is if something went wrong and we need to shut down, or if everything went right and we need to shut down, this is cleaning up everything and shutting it down in an orderly fashion. So this is going to return void because this is literally the function that's shutting down the program. I'm going to call it game cleanup. And we do need to send our game struct into here because that's where our resources are being held. So we got a struct, and it's a pointer to that. And we can just take this real quick, and we need to forward declare it up here. So that is just our function signature that we're forward declaring. And does it? Yeah, okay. So we got to think about how we're shutting this thing down. So we're going to do it in reverse order. So the first thing we did was we initialized SDL, then we created a window, then we created a render. So when we shut it down, we're gonna clean up the render. We're going backwards. We're going to clean up the render, we're going to clean up the window, and then we're going to shut down SDL. So we're going to do it backwards. And since we're dealing with null, since we've made sure that we initialized these two objects to null first, the SDL function will let us call the cleanup on them if they're null. It's checking them internally. So since we're using null, we can clean them even if they haven't been set to anything. If they're still set as a null pointer, we can still do that here. You can't do that with, say, free, but you can do that here because they're checking it inside the function. So we're going to need to, the way that we free the render is we call a function called destroy render, and the way that we clean up the window is the same thing, destroy window, and then SDL quit. So let's look at those functions real quick. What do we got here? We got, destroy window. And we probably want destroy render first because we're going in reverse order. So destroy render takes a pointer to the render. Okay. If render is null, the function will return immediately. So it's okay that we are sending in null. We can basically, if the pointer is already null, we can still tell it to destroy the render, and it'll say, okay, I'm checking it internally. I know that it's null or not null. So this helps us out because this means we don't need to know what has been allocated yet. We can just tell it to clean up everything. So we're going to use this right here. All right. So yeah. And it's just going to be the game renderer now because we're passing in the game. Just like that. And the to clean up the window is going to literally be the exact same. So it's over here. So this one here, destroy window, it's doing the exact same thing. We need the pointer to the window. It's cleaning that up. So we're just going to do the exact same thing in our code here. We're just going to go down here. We can, it's almost the same. So we need to change this to game window, and we're destroying a window. So we've destroyed our render, we've destroyed a window, and now we need to shut down SDL. Let's see, is it here? Destroy. Okay. So we are going to use SDL quit. We're going to call this after that we've already freed everything, when we've freed all memory that has been allocated with SDL, and every system that has been started. This is the end process. This thing needs to be called last, and we don't need to do anything. It's a void function. It's taking nothing. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. So SDL quit. And now that everything is done, we're just going to exit the program. And we're going to say that, I have exit with 0 here, but that's not really telling us if we failed. So it's always going to say it exited successfully. So this program right here is not checking to see, like if it fails, it's not basically, the main function is not coming back with failure as well. It's just always succeeding. I don't really like that. Let's do it for now. We'll have a little think about it. Okay. Again, that's not optimal right here, because we're not really telling the program if we exited on a success or exited on a failure, but we'll come back to that. Okay, so this SDL, remember, it's a bool, so we can wrap this in an if statement. And we can just tell it to clean up the game if it didn't succeed. Game, and we're just passing in the game. What if we put the exit here, and we put it as say 1 or something, and we remove it from here, and then we can put, it's just fine here. Yeah, that kind of, this will let it shut down everything else. If our error happened here, we clean up the game, it runs this, but then we know that an error happened. But if it doesn't happen, we keep going, and then we can clean up our code just because we're done with the program now here. So we can call it again. Okay, so this is great. We're initializing SDL. We're let's put our thing here. I'm gonna move this actually, and I'm gonna say all successful or something, because we're not actually making the window yet, or we're not showing them, Oh, we are making the window. We're not setting up the render yet. Okay, so it's all good. So right here, initializing, if something might happen anywhere here, if something it bails out early from the function wherever it fails, and then it's going to call a cleanup, and we're exiting badly. Otherwise, if this succeeds, we're actually just cleaning it up anyway because we're shutting the program down. But we're going to let ourselves know it was good. Kind of want to put something here just for fun. Oh, to let us know. Let's say bad. Okay, all good, all bad. Let's save this and test it out real quick. Okay, all good. Nothing really happened so far. That's fine. It's about to happen. So now we have basically everything loaded. Everything's been created. Let's try to simulate something went wrong. If we just change this right here, it's gonna, even though the function succeeded, it's going to fail because it's saying, hey, if something is here, that's a bad thing. So we're kind of faking that something went wrong. And we should see all bad. Whoops, we need to recompile it. Yeah, there's our error creating window. Now you'll notice that we get the message that we created, which was the error creating window, spelled wrong. I don't know why I keep spinning those two around. So we get the message that we created, but we don't get anything else because actually SDL didn't actually error. We just simulated that it errored. There was no actual SDL error. If there was an SDL error, then it would spit something else. Okay, so let's get back to the all good. Yep. Okay. Okay. So now we have everything loaded. We have everything on error can be shut down correctly. On when it's all good, it's shut down correctly. And we have nothing really happening here. So what we need to do is we need to kind of clear a render. We need a render that we can display. And then we need to display the render. And then we need to actually just let it be seen for a bit. Because what's happening is it's probably just opening and closing faster than we can see it. So we need to pause the program so that we can see this happen. So the first thing we need to do is just clear a render. So we got a render object, but we just need to say, hey, I want a blank render. So that is render clear. So SDL render clear. This is just gonna, it's kind of our canvas, whatever we're painting on. We need to clear one. We're not going to set a color or anything, so it's just going to be black by default. And it's just a function. It returns again 0 on success, something else on failure, and then we can get that from SDL get error. And we just need the pointer to the render. So this is very, very straightforward. It's clear, render clear, yeah. Okay, so render clear. Yeah, render. And it's a bit weird because it's render clear, not render clear, so it's a bit strange. I don't know. Oh, we're passing in our render. And this is not really, we're not doing anything important. We're not loading a major resource. We're just clearing a render. So if this fails, it's not really going to affect our program very much. Especially if you're running a game at like 60 times a second. If it fails like one time, you don't need your game to shut down. You need it to shut down if you didn't actually start SDL or you didn't load your sound system or something like that. But the render not being cleared it's not really a major fail. So I'm not even going to grab the error here. There's no reason for me to do that. Okay, so we're clearing the render. Now we need to present the render. So that is over here. This is SDL is double buffered. So the canvas that we've just cleared, we could paint some stuff onto that canvas. We could put sprites on it or change the color, whatever we want. But it's not seen until we present it. So it's kind of like we're painting on a canvas that you can't see yet. You see the canvas that's presented to you. And then when we're all done painting on the canvas, we present it and it flips those canvases. It shows us the one that was being worked on all at once. So imagine if you had two canvases, people get to see one that you finished painting, and while you're working on the other one, nobody sees it. So they're seeing the one that's finished. You're working on one in the background, and then when you're finished, you just flip them real quick. So there's no drawing in real time. Everything just happens all at once. You see the new image. So this is what this is doing. This is presenting the render that we've been painting to. So we're not actually painting anything to it. It's just 0 right now, but we still need to do this. So again, this is just taking a pointer to a render, and it's a void, so it's not even returning an error. And it doesn't matter. We don't need to worry about that either. So let's do that. Yeah. Oh, these are, we're not passing these into a function, so they're not, so this, we haven't passed in this game as a pointer to anything. We're actually using the game directly. So this is going to be we're just going to use the member. We're not dereferencing it. Okay, so if we do this right now, we're going to see the render is going to be set to black. We're going to present it, but the screen is probably going to disappear faster than we can even see it. And we can try that real quick. We probably won't even see a window pop up. Yeah. But if we delay it, if we use SDL delay, which basically pauses the program for a fixed amount of time in milliseconds, then we can see it open and sit there and then close when the delay is done. So that is over here at SDL delay, and it just takes in a UN32 in milliseconds. So if we do say 5,000 milliseconds, that'll be 5 seconds. So a window should stay open for 5 seconds. It'll be a black screen, and then it'll close. Just gonna go 5,000. And so we should clear a render. We're going to present our render, and then we're going to just pause the program for 5 seconds, and then we're going to clean up. And there is our window. And we can actually close it. I can't tell it to close or anything else like that because I'm not actually getting the events of if a close window occurred. So if I try to close it, or if you're in Windows or Mac or a floating window manager where you have the little X in the right or left corner of this top of the screen, that they won't actually work because we need to actually handle those events that happen. So in this case, this window is literally going to open. It's going to ignore everything that we tell it to do, and it's going to be there for 5 seconds, and then it's going to close. But it does have a title, and so it'll show up here. I'm not using a floating window manager, so it doesn't show up in the top, but it'll show up right here. I'm using in Vim right now. So if we launch this, we should see the title that we set earlier, which is 01 open window. And there, whoop, sorry. When I select on it, up here in the corner, or in the top up here, right here, we should see 01 open window. Let's do it again. And I'm selected on it. Do you see it up there? It says 01 open window. So that was what we set up here, right here. So if you want to change that, that will be the window, that'll be the title of your window right there. And if you wanted to change the size of the window, this 800 by 600, this is the width and the height that that window is opening at. So now we are initializing. If anything happens, we're cleaning it up. We are clearing our render. We are presenting our render. We're letting it be seen to us for 5 seconds, and then we're cleaning everything up and we're shutting down. And that is everything for this. I know that's quite a lot, but it is C. C is kind of low level. We need to kind of deal with all these, manage all these resources and stuff. But actually drawing something on the screen is less than this. This is the most code that you're going to see, just kind of setting up the whole system right here and making decisions on how you deal with errors and all that stuff. So I'm going to remove these things right here. That was just for us to see what was happening. And that should be it. Save that. Recompile it. And the only thing we're really linking to on this one is the SDL library. You know, nothing else is really happening on this one. And there we go. Like I said, if we try to close this, it's actually, I don't see it here, but if you're in Windows or a tiling window manager and you try to close it, it might actually say it's not responding, because your window manager might say, hey, this thing's been told to shut down, but it's not shutting down, because that window actually doesn't, it's not taking those inputs yet. We'll do that in a future video.